Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, February 21st, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week we head to Kansas City, Missouri to get a peek behind the scenes of the Kansas City Biermeisters 24th Annual Homebrew Competition. We talked to two of the organizers of the competition about what it takes to put together such an event and to make it successful. We had a great time in Kansas City. I headed up there with four members of the Fayetteville Lovers of Pure Suds, or FLOPS, Mark, Mike, Ash, and Tom. We took a tour of Boulevard Brewing Company and interviewed Boulevard's head brewer, Stephen Powles. During and afterwards, we were treated to some awesome beers, some that will be released to the public, and at least one that's an in-house experiment. I'm going to run that interview in a few weeks along with a video tour of the brewery. So you'll want to look out for that. We had a great chat with Stephen, and we certainly appreciate the hospitality. After the visit to Boulevard, we braved a snowstorm and bumper-to-bumper traffic to arrive a little late at the competition, which was held at Flying Monkey Brewery in Olathe, Kansas. While the weather was cold, the welcome was warm, and we had a fine time down there. Thanks to everyone in Kansas City for being so gracious and hospitable. Speaking of competitions, Rick Sellers of Pacific Brew News sent me a list of all the prizes for the Celebration competition being put on by the Gold Country Brewers Association out there in California. Lots of great stuff. To those who place at the top of that field, you can go to goldcountrybrewers.org for more information. That's goldcountrybrewers.org for more information. Entry deadline is March 3rd. Another Rick, this one from the Denver area, wrote in with a quick suggestion. I thought I'd share a quick experiment of sorts that I tried on a pale ale of mine recently. I'm sure that many people have done this before, but I've never thought of it or heard of it, so it may be worth a mention. Rick says, a few months ago, I made a pale ale that I kegged. When tasting it, I noticed a slight buttery taste as the beer in the glass warmed. This diacetyl taste wasn't strong enough for my coworkers to mind, as they enjoyed it every Friday. Rick says he would put some in a growler and bring it to work. However, that slight off flavor would drive me crazy every time I sipped the beer. Anyway, I mentioned my problem to Kevin DeLang of the Brew Hut, my local homebrew store, and he advised me to open the keg right up and dry hop with whatever I have in the freezer. I ended up sticking a mess of different hops in the keg, Cascade, Chinook, and Centennial, and within a few hours the hop aroma was so strong that it totally covered up any off flavors. Rick says, I think we all recognize that it isn't the best practice to open a keg and mess with the contents, and this certainly wasn't exactly how I had hoped to get the right flavor of my beer, but what the heck. It worked, and now I'm running low on pale ale. Well, there you go. When in doubt, hop the snot out of it, right? Dry hopping in the keg, I believe, is a fairly common practice to get that nice, fresh hop aroma. And everybody I've talked to or read has said that you don't really have to worry about infection from the hops when you dry hop. And if it's appropriate for the style, go for it, especially if it's covering up a slight defect in your beer. I appreciate the tip, Rick. Nate, also from Denver, writes with an easy one, and I like those. I appreciate that. Nate says, I've been brewing for a short 4 years and keep hearing this term. I usually nod and act like I know what it is. My question is, what is a session beer? Well, Nate, I'm glad you sent in this question because, we get listeners who've been brewing for a long time and listeners who have been brewing for a short period of time or never at all sometimes. And I probably tend to take it for granted that everybody knows all the terms that we use. A session beer usually refers to beers of a fairly low alcohol level. Beers that you can have several of over an evening or a session of drinking beers and still be able to hold a fairly intelligent conversation. Now, when we talked to Adam Avery at his brewery in Boulder, he said that his IPA had become his session beer. Well, Avery's IPA is 6.5% alcohol by volume, so one man's session beer is another's 1 or 2 and I'm done beer. But I guess your perspective changes when you brew so many tasty, higher alcohol level beers as Adam does. Speaking of Avery, Chris from Chicago writes, listening to your recent episode about the collaboration, not litigation brew, I thought it was really cool to see the relationship that brewers can have amongst themselves. Then I went to check out the beer list of the Michigan Brewers Guild Winter Beer Festival, and apparently there's a third Salvation beer out there. Atwater Brewing in Michigan also has an IPA dubbed Salvation. Chris says perhaps this could be the beginning of a three-way beer collaboration. Well, you can insert your own three-way themed jokes here for those of you playing at home. The Salvations from Avery and Russian River are both Belgians, and although they're fairly different, they're kind of from the same family. And I don't know how an IPA would play with that group. It'd be fun to experiment, though. If you can get your hands on all three Salvations and are bold enough to mix them, drop me a line and let me know what you find out. Lance from Durham, North Carolina writes with a good suggestion for the show that I've received several times from listeners over the past 80-some-odd weeks. Lance says, how about a session comparing brewing software? Maybe compare the big three pay-to-use outfits, Beer Tools Pro, Beersmith, and ProMash, with some of the free guys. Well, I appreciate that suggestion, Lance, and to all the others who have suggested that over time as well. I've received that suggestion several times. I think it's a great idea. There's also Beer Alchemy for the Mac. I'm a big Mac fan, so I've got to mention that one too. The only problem that I have is that I don't have a lot of time to play with the software to adequately evaluate all of them. So that's why I haven't done that show yet. So I need your help. If you'd like to send in your thoughts about brewing software that you've used, I would greatly appreciate it. We can do a show with your comments and maybe get a kind of a picture of what's available out there. And especially if you've used more than one of the programs and are familiar with more than one and can kind of compare and contrast those programs. You can send in your brewing software reviews, and please make them fairly brief so that we can get a bunch of them in one show. Send those brewing software reviews to james@basicbrewing.com, or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Well, since I woke up hoarse this morning for some reason, I don't know why, let's get to our interview. As I said at the top of the show, we had a great time in Kansas City. Despite the cold and blustery weather, we attended the 24th annual Kansas City Biermeisters homebrew competition. It was a good chance to talk to other brewers and to sip some very tasty brews. Chris Stenger, the club president, brought a bottle of Olathe from New Belgium Brewing. So, he knows where the soft spot in my palate is, I guess. and I got a few soft spots in my head, too, but that's another issue. So many thanks to Chris. It was fun meeting him as well. John Palmer was also there, and it's always fun to see John. And we took the chance to talk to Neva Ford and Alberta Rager about what it takes to put together a successful competition and the keys to keeping a good club together for a quarter of a century. And we started our chat with Neva.
Well, I've been a member of the club now for about 5 years. And this year in this competition, I am the co-chairman of the competition with Fred Zimmerman. And last year I was chairman of the competition, but I had really meant to step down and not do it again. And they didn't have anybody willing to be on the committee that had done it before. So I thought, well, one more year. Why not?
And what's the participation this year? How are you doing this year?
Well, we have we had a lot of judges and stewards sign up, a lot more than what we had expected, given that we started a little bit later than normal. But then the weather really hit us bad, and we were down a little bit tonight. So hopefully most of them will show up tomorrow. But for judges and stewards, we had a pretty good entry. Now, entries, as far as beer entries, we were down about 100 because we usually start in about July, and we didn't get started till November this year.
So, how many entries did you have this year?
268, which is not bad actually. I mean, we had about 360 last year, so we're pretty happy given the fact that we started 4 months too late. So,
And what are the popular categories this year?
Oh, boy, I wish I had my sheet in front of me to tell you, because I could tell you how many entries are actually in every category. I think we have we have a pretty big stout category this year. I know that for a fact. And I think the American pales are pretty popular as a general rule.
And what, for a club that's just getting off the ground and hasn't done a competition like this, what goes into putting together a competition? What's the first step, and how do you get going?
Well, the first thing you have to do is make sure you have a good date. You want to look around your area, your regional area, to make sure that you don't have any other competitions on top of it. We had a competition a couple of weeks ago in Minnesota, which actually competes with us, but they did an excellent job. It's called the Mississippi Mashout. There's a competition next weekend in Iowa, but it's a very, very small club, and they, I don't think, get about half the entries we do. So you have to make sure you have a good date, and then you have to find a location, and location is very difficult because you have to find a place that will allow you to bring in homebrew. You can't just go to a hotel and expect that they're going to automatically let you bring it in. We are very lucky in Kansas City in that we have several breweries around town. We're now at Flying Monkey Brewery, and they have been great to let us have it this year. The last several years, we've had it at a place called Holyfield Winery out in Basel, Kansas, and you have to be able to find a place that has the availability to store the beer for a week ahead of time, because you want to make sure you get it there so it settles, and someplace that has cold storage, especially for the lagers. You want to be able to keep those cold. So those are the real main things that you're looking for to get started.
Because you want to treat the beer well to make sure that it is representative of the work of the brewer, right?
Absolutely. You have to make sure that, because the lagers have to stay cold, ales are a little bit what they call cellar temperature, which is about 50 degrees. And we have, fortunately here at Flying Monkey, it works out really well because they have obviously a huge cooler because of being a brewery. And then the dock area is cold enough that it's not too cold to hurt the ales.
So how do you get the word out?
Well, if you do it early enough and you sign up with the organizing national organizations like the American Homebrewers Association, you can get in the American Homebrewers magazine called Zymergy, and that goes out every 2 months. And so if you get in that starting in July, it goes out for a couple of months, a couple of times before the competition. And then we have a pretty good email list that we send out emails, and we get on all the beer boards across the Midwest especially, and put out the word that we're having a competition.
And what percentage of representation do you have from brewers who are entering locally and from outside your region?
Well, amazingly enough, a lot of outside our club. We have a lot of people here, obviously from Arkansas. We have people down here, even judging from Minnesota. Iowa will be here eventually. I think they're having travel problems tonight, too. We have people in from Lawrence and the metropolitan area, which to me is not just Kansas City. We have Lawrence and Blue Springs and Independence that are all here. And we have people, I think, that even came up from Oklahoma.
Now, how do you recruit your judges? Do you have certain specifications on whether they're BJCP certified or whether they have experience in judging? How do you do that?
Well, we have the same mailing list that we do for our competitors, and we do like to have BJCP certified judges if we can, but it's a volunteer deal, of course, and they're paying their way to get here. We do have several BJCP certified judges, but we look for our head judges to be either BJCP or at least a bit of a good experience. And then we are also willing to help train judges. So we do have we have several novice judges that the experienced judges are helping them learn how to judge, which I think is a great way to get people started.
So you don't necessarily have to have experience to judge?
Well, we'd like to have a little bit of experience, but you have to start somewhere. I mean, if you've never judged before, how are you going to? It's kind of like finding a job. If you don't have the experience, how do you get to do it? So, yeah, we will take novice judges.
And do you structure the flights of categories so that you have a more experienced judge as kind of a shepherd to less experienced judges?
Yes. Absolutely. We have to have experienced judges be in charge as the head judges, and then we have the novice judges underneath them. And they're there to give them advice and say, hey, here's what we're looking at. If here's what I see, what do you see, sort of a thing.
And how do you assign the judges to the categories?
I don't. We have Alberta Rager to do that, who you just heard laughing in the background. Alberta is in charge of the judges. She knows the people from around the area, and she looks at their experience level, and when they send in their judge applications, what experience they have and what level they're at.
So do you try to get judges that, and maybe I should ask her, but do you try to get judges who are experienced with certain categories, and then those who aren't as well?
I think so. I think Alberta tries to look at we do ask them what they would like to judge. And if they're also a home brewer, we also make sure that they're not judging a category that they've entered. And so I think that Alberta likes to make sure that if they are good at that particular category, she likes to make sure that they're judging that category, if she can. We were a little luckier this year that we had a lot more judges sign up than we had originally expected.
And maybe we can introduce Alberta at this time. Introduce yourself, Alberta.
Say hi, Alberta.
Hi, I'm Alberta Rager.
And you're one of the co-founders of the Kansas City Biermeisters?
Yes, I'm one of the founding members of the Biermeisters.
And Neva says that you're one of the ones who helps assign the judges to the certain categories.
That's correct.
How do you do that?
We look at judges who are certified by the Beer Judge Certification Program and try to have all of our lead judges certified from the program, pair them with novice and apprentice judges to get good training. And as Neva said, you cannot judge a category in which you were entered. Some judges have preferences as far as, what they prefer to judge, and when possible, we try to honor that. But at the same time, we want to have a broad range of experiences for our judges. And the big key is balancing the teams.
Do you have categories that are, say, if you ask people to specify preference when they ask to judge, do you have categories that are obviously more popular than others?
Not really.
They're all even?
Probably they're not all even, but different judges have their preferences. So by the time you have, 30 or 40 people, and they each have their own preferences, then it kind of spreads across the board.
Oh, wow. So if you get a pool big enough, you're going to have people that will enjoy all the categories.
That's true. And judges generally will, we try to make sure that on the 2 or 3 judging flights that at least one of the categories that they're judging is something that they have requested. But because everything's not judged at the same time, they don't always get everything they ask for. And sometimes they get a category they haven't asked for. And if they feel that they are not qualified to judge that category, then, we send the notices out several days in advance. They contact me, and we try to make changes to accommodate their qualifications so we can offer the best possible feedback to the participants.
And obviously, to someone who is entering a beer in the competition, getting the feedback is, besides getting the awards, getting the feedback is the major incentive to entering the competition.
Definitely.
And we send, the judge sheets get sent to the competitors. So once we're done with the awards on Saturday night, we ship them all out, or mail them all out to everybody so that they see how well they did with the individual judges. Now, the judges' names, I don't believe, are included on the sheets, are
they? Yes, they are. The judges' names as well as their experience levels, and some BJCP judges even include their their judge number, and their email address if the participant would like to contact them for more information or because they have a concern about the way their beer was scored. But the objective is to provide feedback. What the judges do is they look at, they smell, they taste these beers, and they describe the beer. It's like, what are you seeing, and how does that fit the style guidelines? It can be a great beer, but not in the right style. Or there can be some, fermentation flaws or recipe design flaws. So all of this information is provided to the brewer to help them make better beers.
And then if the comments are a little nebulous or maybe not easily understood, there's an email address so that they can actually get in contact with the judges.
All judges don't include that, but some of them do, and it's generally the more qualified, more experienced judges that welcome the entrants contacting them.
One of the things that we do, and I'm sure most competitions do, is we also instruct our stewards that when they go through and look at the judge sheets when they're done, if they feel like the judges haven't provided enough feedback, they ask them to write more notes so that when we send it out. So the stewards are very important too, besides just the judges.
What is the job of a steward? What do they do?
Well, they're there to make sure that the judges have the correct beers, number one. Make sure that they have, they provide them with water and bread so that they can use all that. And then look over all of the sheets that the judges have filled out, the judge sheets. Make sure that they add up correctly. Make sure that the comments look like they're appropriate or that there's enough comments and that they're filled out correctly. And basically they're there to help the judges do whatever they need to do.
What do you think is the most challenging part of putting something like this together?
Oh, heavens. Having done this now I think I've been on the competition committee for 4 years, 5 years?
Several.
Yeah. This year was the most challenging because we started late. We weren't sure of a location. We ended up with a great committee who did a fantastic job, in my opinion. And the most challenging thing is to make sure that you get the information out there so that you do get the judges and the stewards and the competitors. And that was really tough for us this year because we did start so late. And I think that we got very lucky in that we got a lot of stewards. We got a lot of stewards, a lot of judges, and not as many entries as we hoped for, but more than we expected. And I think timeliness is very important in putting these events on.
And practice makes perfect, I would imagine.
Well, maybe. I've done this for 4 or 5 years now, and every time I come here, I learn something new that we could do or make it easier for the next person who does it.
And Alberta, you are one of the co-founders of the club. Can you give us a little background on the Kansas City Biermeisters?
The Kansas City Biermeisters grew out of classes that Bacchus and Barleycorn were holding because the group was having such a great time getting together and learning about beer, talking about beer, sharing beers. They said, hey, this is the last class and we don't want to quit doing this. So our last class ended up being the organizational meeting for the club, and that's sort of been what the club's been based on, is learning from each other, sharing commercial beers as well as beers we've made, sharing our beer knowledge, sharing our beer travel experiences. So we're about how to brew and about different beer styles.
How long has the club been together?
25 years.
This is our 24th competition.
Wow. So you started competing right off.
Right off.
Was it important to keeping the club together and keeping it vital and strong?
Initially, we, I think, did it just because we thought it'd be fun, and since it's the major event that we put on every year. So I think yes, now it's very important as far as the viability of the club, and it keeps us working together, and it does keep us strong.
One of the things that I have found, and I have never gone to anybody else's competition other than the national AHA competition. I'm always surprised when I find people coming here from all over the Midwest. I mean, we have people here from Arkansas, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska. Indiana,
Minnesota.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's phenomenal that people want to come to this competition because I personally think it's a great competition, and not because I had anything to do with it, but because it's a great organization to belong to. It's a real camaraderie spirit that you find here. You only maybe get to see these people once a year, and everybody really seems to enjoy coming here. I don't know why. It's always cold here, but it's always fun.
It's stimulating. The
Yes.
cold is stimulating. The walk over here from the motel was stimulating. Well, it looks like you've got a fairly you've got a good group despite the weather. And hopefully you'll have more tomorrow.
Yes.
And if there was any piece of advice that you would give people who are wanting to found a club or to found a competition, what would that be?
Well, I think you need to have the club before you even think about the competition, because you've got to have your resources, human resources. But if you're wanting to, start a club, what you need is a group of individuals who share a common interest in home brewing, beer styles, beer history. Different clubs have different philosophies on the way they want to operate. So you need to have your common interest, and then after you've got your group together, then, what was the question about competition? Oh,
the biggest advice that you would have.
Make a plan, and your plan, starts with your goal, and then your timeline to get there, and all the components that you need to achieve those goals.
All right. Any last words, Neva?
No, I think Alberta's right. One of the things that you have to know is in anything that you do, it's anything you want to do, whether it's in a club organization or your business life or your personal life, you do need an end goal. And if you start out with that goal in mind and you make a good plan to get there, and I ended up doing this 4 or 5 years ago, but think about this. This is a 24-year-old competition. I had a lot of people that knew what they were doing before I started it. And so I didn't just come up with this on my own. I had, and like I said, Fred Zimmerman, who is the chairman of the competition, and I'm just his co-chair. We had a great committee, but we had a plan. I mean, we sat down one night and we went through what we wanted to accomplish to get to this end, and I am thrilled with the fact that we managed to do that. And we have not just got a lot of competitors, a lot of judges, a lot of stewards. We have a lot of sponsorship that have come through for us every year, and it has been a great event, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a wonderful event. Tomorrow you're here, which I think is fantastic. We have a great guest speaker with John Palmer, who came at a last minute. Danny O'Neill, who owns the roastery here in Kansas City, is going to be here in the morning, and we have a great deal of support out of just the local community too. And it's having a plan is the way to make it work.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Neva, Alberta, and all the others in the Kansas City Biermeisters for their warm hospitality. There were 268 entries in the competition from 15 states, and according to the club's website, Best of Show went to Ed Vandegrift of ZZ Hops for his Blonde Ale. Second runner-up, Best of Show, was Wesley Powell of the KGB, and I believe that's the Kirkendall Graham Brewers down in Houston. Chris Stinger from the Kansas City Biermeisters took Extract Best of Show for an American IPA, and Mead Best of Show went to Lonnie McAllister from the Mastronauts for a traditional mead. Congratulations to everybody. I'll put a link to the full results in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. Well, next week, Chris Colby from Brew Your Own Magazine joins us to talk about malting your own grain. For those of you who want control over every single part of the brewing process. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And also, remember, if you want to participate in sending in reviews of brewing software that you've used, I would greatly appreciate it. And while you're on our site, you can check out our online shop where you can find great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. In our first one, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. And we show you how to batch sparge and fly sparge and step mash and infusion mash, all in kind of a nonlinear format that's kind of fun. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from us online, and I'll pack it up and ship it to you myself. All the 2007 Brewers logbooks are gone, sold out. So thanks very much to everybody who purchased one, and especially those who have submitted feedback and suggestions for making next year's better. And thanks also to everyone who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Martha Stewart's Homekeeping Handbook, the essential guide to caring for everything in your home, and a 1 gigabyte DDR 667 SO DIMM. Thanks again, everybody, for doing that. And remember, we can't tell who bought what, so, buy whatever you want, and we appreciate your support. Thanks. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson, our buddy in Austin, who also did our logo. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.